Dark Multiverse, or Tales from the Dark Multiverse, Batman Hush issue 1. This, of course, is... Where's my thing here? Oh, I didn't write the creators down for this one. That's my bad.
It's Philip Kennedy Johnson writing and Dexter Soy on art.
Thank you. That explains why the art was good.
It does, doesn't it? Because Dexter Soy tends to be rather decent. I do have one critique near the start, although it might be more of a lettering critique than an art critique, but the art lends to the problem.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think it's like the third page. It's the double page splash of the origin stuff. I think it's part of it's this faded out kind of blue grayscale style coloring on the art, right? To give it it's the flashback coloring, and the narration box kind of going through the history is in the big yellow boxes. My eyes wanted to read this in the wrong order because I went from the top left and I wanted to go straight down because it looks like the page is split in 3, but it's not. You have to go across first and then across the bottom. And I think the fact that the white panel borders, especially on that left side, splitting the top and bottom, blended in with the art too much with that coloring that I didn't realize until after I read it and then went back up, and it just didn't make any sense to me. I was like, hang on, something's not right here.
Yeah, okay, I can see that. This is an interesting one because this is a return to this format that we've not seen since basically the first Metal was coming out, right? Or just after the
no,
first
it was quite a bit later than that. I think it was only about because it was these finished right before all the stuff happened with Wally. Because I think this Tempest Fuginaut happened in the he showed up in the end of that Wally series flash forward, right? To give him all his Manhattan powers.
He did. Although I don't think it was like right before that though, because I think he'd been away for a little bit of time.
See, this is the thing. I don't know if it was that long ago. I didn't think it was anywhere near the last Metal.
Maybe it wasn't during the last Metal, but it's been a while since the last one. It's been over a year.
Do you know what the last one was? Maybe Blackest Night or Infinite Crisis, maybe. I don't know. I'm kind of looking, just to guess. November 2019, December 2019. So about a year since those last ones. But that's closer to now than the first Metal, right?
When did the first Metal end?
It's a good question.
I want to say that was like the end of 2018.
It's a very good question.
Oh no, it wasn't, because it was before No Justice, which was like in April. So that'd have been early 2018 it ended. Okay, that sounds right. That sounds roughly right in my head. Because Snyder's Justice League started in summer 2018. Anyway, it's been a while, is the point, right?
It has, yeah. I'll grant you that.
It's format. So I was kind of curious, like, what's the point of this? What is the point of bringing these back? Because, well, we are doing some, obviously, Dark Multiverse stuff because they're featuring in Death Metal to an extent. It's not really the focus of Death Metal this time. They're there. There's all these, like, Dark Batman, or Dark versus Batman running around. And it always
felt like, as much as they were an excuse to do DC's What If stories, with the Tempest Fuginaut stuff, it felt like there was a point to those original 5 or 6 issues, whatever it was.
Yeah, and I don't think that's here. Like, Tempest is there at the start and the end to sort of like essentially act as like the Crypt Keeper from Tales from the Crypt. That's kind of his purpose here.
That's a pretty good analogy, I think. Yeah.
But it doesn't feel like it's building to it. It feels like it's just here. He's just here to sort of introduce. He's here to give the almost another anthology to compare it to. It's almost like the Rod Serling intro and outro to a Twilight Zone, where he's just there to sort of say, "Deep in the dark multiverse."
I could almost read some of this in his voice.
Yeah. So that's that. So the opening of the book explains, this is what the Hush story normally is. If you've read Hush, you'll hear it all. But then explains the backstory of this world that we're getting into, where Tommy was with Bruce and their parents were with him when his parents were killed. So they all witnessed it. They were all kind of like at the end of the alleyway and watched it all happen.
Yeah.
And they took in Bruce instead of going to Alfred, and they raised Bruce. And it leads to this world, and the first chunk of the issue is basically just establishing what this world is, which is that Tommy was a senator,
Yes, financed by Talia al Ghul and the rest of the League of Assassins.
Yes, they are kind of in a weird, not so romantic relationship. Jason's like a playboy, but he's also an arms dealer, as we find out later.
And he's
Um,
with Dinah.
which is irrelevant because she never pops back up later.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah. Harvey Dent's Attorney General, and you've got
that rings true. That's so far the bit that I go, yeah, I see that happening.
I wasn't really disputing that, to be fair.
No, but I just all the rest of it feels like just kind of a lot of this feels like just for the sake of being a little bit different, whereas Harvey Dent as Attorney General
I mean,
makes perfect sense.
you always have this fine line with these like other world stories of like where all these characters are. There's one big one later that I do think is really lazy and on the nose. We'll get into it, but
I'm intrigued.
So basically, he flies off. He leaves this big fancy party he's at because he hears something's happening at Arkham, which he basically funds. And Dr. Crane, of course, shows him the body of Bruce Wayne. And Bruce Wayne in this world has basically been mentally ill since childhood.
Thomas Elliot we're following. We should point out. I don't think you mentioned that.
No?
I don't think you did. I could be wrong, but
I started off by saying he was Senator, right?
Maybe. I don't know. But this is all Thomas Elliot that we're following.
Yeah,
I think you just kind of mentioned, Thomas Elliot Senator, and then went straight into all the other bits.
Sure, okay. Yes, Thomas Elliott's the one we're following. And he gets taken to the body of Bruce Wayne, who has finally somehow killed himself in Arkham. And he's been in and out of Arkham his whole life because he's mentally ill because of the death of his parents. And Crane's like, hey, I'm surprised you didn't get me to kill him sooner because now you are complete control of Wayne Enterprises, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah, he's like, hey, he's been a vegetable for years, so I get why it's been easy for you. But I mean, this definitely makes it clear for you now.
Yeah, and it teases that the janitor's the Joker in this world, with the big grin and all that. You find out for sure later, of course, but and then, but the thing we hear though is that there's a legend going through all the cells that they all believe this this demon bat that Amadeus Arkham
yes
was obsessed about,
just the Bat of Arkham.
Yeah. And we see this, hushed version of Batman with the bandages that attack and kill Crane. And this sets up this idea, like the hand of Bruce Wayne had like a ticket, the movie ticket from the night Bruce died, and we find out that all these other people dying throughout the city are these like basically little bits of evidence from that night are popping up around them. And we get more world building. We get Barbara Gordon, who leads the Outsiders, who are kind of like a anti fascist squad, who's trying to avenge the death of her father.
Yeah.
Tim's on that team.
There's a lot of extraneous world building in this issue.
There's a lot that's not that important. Like, for example, I'm not even sure if it's Steph or Cass who's on this team. I assume it's Cass because of the full mask, but I'm not even sure, to be honest.
I would have lent towards Cass as well, but she talks a lot.
It never really comes up. It doesn't really matter who it is. And this is when we get the Grey Sun pops up, and this is the one I hate. I hate this bullshit.
I get why you hate it, but I'm not going to defend it and say, I like it, because I don't really like it. But this isn't a new thing for this run. Dick Grayson being the Grey Sun and being a Talon was a whole thing even in Snyder's Batman, and it was part of Nightwing at that time.
I know, I know all this, and I hated the Talon stuff with Dick, and I hate that it's brought up in this. But I just hate that he is publicly known as the Grey Sun. It's just like Tim Drake being called the Drake. I hate it with every fiber of my being.
I get that. I really do feel that.
Yeah. So he's actually working for Thomas Elliot. He's kind of like the head of because we keep hearing about President March, who of course is Lincoln March. So you can tell that this story is definitely, while it's meant to be a hush, what if kind of story.
There's a lot of attention to the early Snyder.
There's a lot of stroking the Snyder run in this as well.
I don't mind when it was President March and that was early on. I was like, okay, that's kind of cool because there's no reason that Lincoln March shouldn't exist in an Elseworlds, right?
No?
I'm like, okay, I'm down for that. I'm down for not even that, him knowing that he's related or any of that potential bollocks. Just the idea that he exists and he rose up to become president is fine. I'm okay with that. It was the Grayson stuff that links it that makes it rough, I think.
Yeah, but then you also have, Grayson saying, the Court of Owls is sentencing you to die, blah, blah, blah. His outfit's very Court of Owls-esque. It's not
Oh,
quite...
it's a straight up almost talent outfit.
Yeah, the mask is very different, of course, but it's the color scheme, it's all that. It's just, I mean, honestly, Snyder's run is one that's not aged well for me, because I never liked the back half of it. And we reread the first, 12 issues or whatever,
I think it's 11, but yeah.
The Court of Owls story from the start of the run. And I definitely didn't like it as much as I did the first time I read it. So I'm not as super into a lot of the stuff from it. So, all this stuff being kind of shoehorned in here kind of just felt like a little bit extraneous when, because they go to Jason's, the arms dealer, to find out about, this rocket that shot down the helicopter earlier, and there's a whole fight because the League of Assassins is turning on Thomas Elliot.
Are they not with Tommy Elliot? He doesn't really know, and Talia's like, oh, why would we do this?
This book is over 50 pages long, and I feel like you could cut out half of it. This could be a 25-page book and tell the same story with all this extra fat just cut away from it.
I think part of my biggest problem with this book is I don't understand how this is a Hush Elseworlds. Like, most of the other stories, not all of them were good, right? But all of them, I understood how they were that particular story and a twisted version of that.
I mean,
the only thing that makes this a quote-unquote Hush Elseworlds is that it's Tommy Elliot.
And they've got Batman in bandages to look more Hush-like.
But that's just for reasons, because of the name.
I know, but I'm saying that visually that's what they're doing to try and make it feel that way.
But in terms of the Hush storyline of someone coming back who's, and Bruce doesn't know who it is, and we're going through all these villains. That's kind of what the Hush story is, right? The original story. This is not any version of that story. This isn't a twisted version of it. Well,
what's interesting to me is that early on, what I thought it was going to start doing was the idea that in this world, Bruce was going to use all these villains that didn't really exist yet to attack Tommy. I thought that was going to be the point. It was like a flip where, because that was the whole thing with Hush, is that he used the entire Rose Gallery to get to Batman. Yeah. And I thought this was going to be, Bruce is using, even though they're not like public villains, or they're not known villains in the same way, but because he does use Joker, he's got Jack Napier working as the janitor at Arkham. But I thought he was going to end up having like the help of, pick another villain that wasn't mentioned.
Riddler's a pretty important one for the Hush story.
There you go, just different random villains where Edward Nygma was the guy with the plan and the brains or whatever. I really thought that was where it was going to kind of go, and that's why it was a flip on the Hush story, but it didn't. And I think that was, I don't know, it's not terrible. I think it's easily enough to read, and the art, of course, is pretty good throughout. It's not Soy's best work. I don't think it's as good, say, as his recent Batman the Outsiders issues, but it is pretty solid.
It's perfectly decent. There are some nice panels. The bit where Tommy Elliot is facing off with Dick, and it cuts to the black and white silhouette as they go through the floor when they get dragged down. I think that's a particularly nice panel.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, it's just solid par for the course Dexter Soy work, right? Nothing special, but good, because he doesn't churn out bad work.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically it. The story just kind of ends with Tommy going back to the Wayne Manor, and eventually, I mean, Dick's there as well, and Dick's about to kill him, but then we find out that Alfred is down in the cave with like all the caged other people that Batman's went after, and that's when Hush Batman actually jumps out and basically kills him. It frustrates
me as an issue, and I think it is objectively a bad issue because it's not telling a story. It's the purpose of this issue isn't to tell a story of this alternate version of Hush. It's to set up a world that we can maybe tell stories in the future. That's why we spend so much time with Barbara Gordon and the Outsiders. It's why we set up, here's Jason Todd. Here's what Penguin and Two-Face are doing. Here's where the League of Assassins are. It's all this is. I'm reading it and I'm seeing we can revisit this later. I can see the editors jotting down the notes to revisit future issues. I don't feel a story.
What's frustrating to me is that the whole idea of him using various other characters is kind of brought up because he's basically doing the villain monologue towards the end where he's explaining how he did all this and how he faked his death, and he's got all these people that helped him in Arkham. instead of it being like 6 characters, I mean, first of all, I would have liked it to be more intricate in just one page of him explaining how he used various people, but it's a bunch of like barely nobodies. Like it's just like, okay, I'm sure these are all characters that have popped up in runs or whatever before, but it's not the Riddler, it's not Bane, it's not it's not goddamn Harley Quinn or anything like that. It's it's this dude, Casey Callahan, who's a cat burglar. Okay, who's Casey? Who the F is Casey? And I'm sure
you've just got your episode title right there.
I'm sure there's a fan out there. He's like, what are you talking about? I'm the #1 fan of Casey Callahan, and you, how dare you not know who Casey Callahan is? How dare you run a DC Comics podcast and not know who Casey Callahan is?
It is a lot of like disgraced spy Nick Mason, martial artist Dolores Madigan, mob assassin Sal Buckets Barusco. I'm like, who are all these chumps?
Pretty much.
Like, I think it's notable that page that has like the 6 of them on starts with Amadeus Arkham, because it's like, oh, we all know who Arkham is.
Yeah, that's a part of Batman history, a cool bit of mythology that they can tie into, and I feel like it gets mentioned a lot more ever since the Arkham Asylum game came out. I feel like that's one of those positive influences from other media where someone did something cool with it in the game, and all of a sudden, comic writers started like using that a little bit. That's the history of Arkham. I
think you might be right, but again, like you say, that's a positive example where I don't think any stories have overdone it. It's been referenced here or there, probably more often since that game started doing things with it, but in a way that feels cohesive, and it's a positive feedback loop for it, where I'm quite happy to have more, not stories about Amadeus Arkham, but just, references to establish that, no, this is the history of Gotham. It makes the world feel more real, right?
Yeah, no, I like it. So Batman kills Tommy. We hear the world is wondering where Tommy's disappeared to. Talia's with the President March now, and that's basically it. I mean, honestly, it doesn't do anything that interesting. It's not, like I say, I don't think it's a bad issue, because I think it's written well enough in terms that it flows well. Some of the differences in the world are a little interesting to discover, but it's like 50 pages that ultimately doesn't have enough story to justify it, and then and you're kind of waiting like, okay, so what are you going to do at the end to justify like all this time that was spent on it, and it never really did. So I got to the end of it and went, that was a long read for very little return.
Yeah, I mean, the only 2 things of that whole thing you just said I would dispute are, one, I'm pretty sure he doesn't kill Tommy Elliot. I think he's just in a cage at the end.
Sorry.
I don't see him necessarily, but he kind of mentions, I've forgotten what what daytime is, essentially. And he's like, oh, you will too.
Sure.
And we don't,
sure.
and then we see them all hanging in a cage. So I'm assuming he's just in a cage. And the other thing I disagree is that I do think it is a quote unquote bad issue. And I don't think it has a good story. I think if you cut out half of this, I might say it's a half decent issue, but still probably wouldn't be good, because I don't think the concept is good. But if you cut out all the Barbara stuff, a lot of the Dick Grayson stuff, I might go, okay, it's fine. But I think as it is, it's a mess, and it's bad.
I'm talking about writing quality, art quality, things like that. Conceptually, I agree it's not that interesting.
No, I think writing quality falls under the art quality. I'll give you is fine, absolutely. Dexter Soy does nothing wrong, even if he doesn't excel. Does nothing wrong. Writing quality, I think, comes under that is that it's sloppy.
Okay, fine. You're more negative than I am. Are you happy? You've achieved it, right?
A little bit. Yeah.
What are you giving it?
I'm giving it a 4.
I'll give it a 5. I'll give it a straight down the middle. I think you can happily skip it. It's not going to make you upset or angry. It's just nothing.
And I have to say, it makes me question if I want to read the next Flashpoint one. Maybe I'll see who the team is on it, and if there's a writer that interests me, maybe. But it makes me feel like these issues coming back for the Tales of the Dark Multiverse does feel more like a cash grab, and just because it's a thing rather than there's an actual story here this time.
I would just, depends on who's writing it. Depends like how busy is that week. If it's another quiet week like this, I'm probably a lot more willing to check it out. That's for fair. Curiosity's sake. But they are all kind of really individual. So just because this one was bad doesn't mean, because to be fair, the initial batch of them were mostly pretty good. There was only 1 or 2 that I didn't like out of that first batch.
I really like. We liked Nightfall. We liked.
Death of Superman was good.
Yeah, Infinite Crisis was really good. Yeah. If you're a fan of that story.
Well, Blackest Night was the only one that I remembered.
Yeah, Blackest Night I remember not liking. I'm sure there was more than that though that existed.
Wasn't that
Oh,
many more?
there was
Oh, one or
a
two, I
Judas
think.
Contract, which was fine.
Yeah, that was okay. But yeah, I mean, 3 good
Yeah.
ones out of 5 is not bad for these
No,
types
no,
of thing.
it's absolutely not bad. And like I say, the only reason that I'm like going, oh well, do I really want to read Flashpoint one now? Is more the return of these a year or so later, feeling like just because we can, like the cashing in of it, makes me more skeptical, and this did not convince me otherwise.